So last week when Richard asked me if I had a topic, I didn't. And I only had a week to write my whole speech. So he told me, you better get a topic soon. So I didn't want to do something cliche. So I looked up online what topics for persuasive speeches. And there was one that really caught my attention. And it was a question. It was, should children who commit violent crimes be tried as adults? And immediately I thought, yes, if a crime is a crime no matter who commits it, right? So I figured I would do it on that. And so I started researching it, and as I got in depth with it, I realized that my approach was probably not the right one, because I didn't take into consideration many other aspects of why children shouldn't be tried as adults, because at the end of the day, children are still children. So today I would like to identify why trying children as adults is unfair, unsafe, and ineffective. So the first one is unfair. I believe it's unjust not only because it's unlawful, but it is also immoral. In an article on the Bayview newspaper, Cruz Magana states it's unconstitutional to trial children because under the 14th, 15th, and supported by the 26th Amendment, they are being denied their rights to have a say in law that changes and affects their status as juveniles or minors to punish them as adults. And then she goes on to prove her point. I mean, that was kind of weird. So she goes on to prove her point by saying that before the 15th and the 19th Amendment were set in place, women and people of color had no rights, no say, no vote, no voice whatsoever. So this was ruled as unconstitutional. So basically with that logic, trying kids as adults should be unconstitutional too. So basically what she's saying is that minors who commit crimes still can't vote, can't drink, can't smoke, can't get married, can't join the military. So why is trying them as adults fair? It isn't. Another aspect in which it's unfair, it's because these children still don't have the intellectual or moral capacity to fully understand the consequences of their actions. Some may argue, yeah, everyone, since you're little, you know right from wrong. But, a kid's mind doesn't fully develop until they're 25, so they don't completely understand the long-time effect of their actions. We need to understand that children act on emotion and spur of the moment things. It's not like they plan it out, they're just angry. So, I'm not saying kids are just angry so they kill someone, but we have to take that into consideration that they're still not fully matured or developed yet. So putting them in jail with adults that are fully grown and matured is kind of cruel, to say the least. Which brings me to my second point on why it's unsafe. I believe it's unsafe because, they're criminals. These people have committed legit crimes. It's not like they were just oh, well, I'm mad at you, I'm gonna kill you. They planned it out and they have reasons. Maybe in their childhood something went wrong with them. So putting these kids in this environment kind of, doesn't help their maturing or their growing process or anything, and these kids are still maturing. So, if you put them in a jail with a bunch of criminals, that's their example, and that's what they're gonna later on, become in life. They're gonna be, that's who they're growing up with. So there's as mentioned in an article written by Amy Singer in theexaminer.com, she talks about children in prison, saying they are more vulnerable or susceptible to negative influences and outside pressures, including peer pressure, and their characters are not as well as formed. Therefore, putting them in prison with adults, they're more likely to become more dangerous instead of what they're trying to do, shape them up into becoming somewhat better people when they get out of prison. That leads me to my third and final point on why it's ineffective. Like I mentioned, these children are growing in a negative light, and so their whole life they're viewed as criminals, and they start acting like them as well. Whereas if they were just put in the juvenile prison, the juvenile prison system, these kids can turn their lives around and get a second chance by what they call rehabilitation, which is supposed to correct their misdemeanor tendencies so that they cannot become threats to society, but also they are taught to take part in various personality improvement and other programs. In an article written by Jessica Reeves on Time.com, she states that successful rehabilitation is better for society in the long run than releasing someone who spent their entire young adult life in general prison population. A young person released from a juvenile prison is far less likely to commit a crime than someone coming out of an adult facility. And it was also noted that 2/3 of prisoners reoffend within 3 years of leaving prison, often with more serious and violent offenses. More than 90% of prisoners return to the community within a few years. So basically, they are more likely to commit a crime after being sent to prison, which proves the point of being effective. So in conclusion, I believe that minors should be treated like minors because, that's what they are. Yeah, I do agree that crime is still a crime, no matter who commits it, but we also have to understand that children do it for different reasons than adults, so they should be getting different consequences. Trying them equally has been proven as unfair, unsafe, and ineffective for all the reasons I have outlined throughout my speech.
So Joe, what did you think?
I think that she has a really, really good speaking voice, and she does a good job of not just focusing on one side of the classroom. It seems like she's used to speaking to a lot of people, and it definitely shows when she speaks, so that's admirable. I think the introduction was good because she related to all of us, because I think we were all a little bit stuck on what topic we were going to do, so that drew my attention. As far as the speech goes, I thought it was good, it was organized, but I felt like the conclusion could have came a little bit more strong, but the introduction kind of made up for it because that was so strong, and the body topics supported it. So I thought it was a really good speech, and I think she did a good job delivering it.
Okay. No, I think that the opening works because it's the one time we're hearing it. I tell you what, if everybody was doing the same thing, then we'd probably all be irritated about, well, I couldn't figure out what to talk about, and I was looking through this. So I think you get away with this because you've got the advantage that other people didn't have the same kind of idea, and they could easily do that. Everybody's, like Joe said, everybody's in the same situation. And I like the fact that it personalizes it a little bit, so that's good. I think that gives you some credibility. I'd also agree with Joe about the way you speak. I think you do a nice job talking to the audience. Your voice is pretty effective. 90% of the time you're doing a good job with your audience contact. I am a little distracted by the big pages being waved around in my face. So that's one of those things I don't understand why. I mean, I think I've said that to a half dozen people, and all it requires is that you put your key points on a couple of index cards, put your evidence on a couple of index cards, and instead of having the two big pages that have probably the same amount of information, you got something that's small and relatively innocuous, and it's not nearly as distracting. I do think you need to define the nature of the issue a little bit more, because it makes it sound like 8 and 10-year-olds are being tried as adults, and that's not the case. The argument is really about charging older teenagers with adult crimes when they've committed typically particularly violent crimes. It's not It's not that they're saying, oh, a 15-year-old who committed a burglary should be sentenced to 10 years in prison, because that's not how it works. And I think that you kind of create this image that there are a whole bunch of these kids that are being prosecuted illegitimately and we're turning them into monsters. My guess is that the response to your argument would be, no, we're treating the monsters that exist the way they ought to be treated. We're not creating them, we're responding to them. Because the kids who get charged with being, as an adult and committing these crimes, they're not, your classmates here, they're not your little brothers and sisters, at least I hope not. They're not your little brothers and sisters who simply got carried away and beat somebody up and killed them in the park with their skateboard. That kind of thing. They're usually people who have been involved in a variety of other activities, that sort of thing too. So I think you're being a little disingenuous in describing what's going on here, and you need to be a little bit more vivid about that. But there is a good argument to be made also that says, we need to be trying harder. Other alternatives might work better. We might reduce the problems on these kinds of things. So what kinds of kids, who should be making this decision? You're saying it shouldn't be made at all. And I think that you would find that a lot of people, that was the position 30 years ago, that was fine, we shouldn't be doing that, and nobody was. But it's only been in the last 30 years that those rules have changed, designed to react to particular things. You need to tell us that those particular things are so exceptional that we shouldn't be worried about it, and that, in fact, when they do happen, this juvenile detention would still work better. That was the best piece of information that you had in the speech, and that was the information that said kids coming out of a juvenile center are much less likely to recommit crimes than those coming out of an adult prison. I think that that's probably where you want to focus more of your energy on. The whole first issue about rights and all those kinds of things, that's interesting speculation. I don't know that there's any legal standard that uses that as a criteria, except maybe the author of the article that you were looking at there. The issue of juvenile detention and trying kids as adults has come up and has been repeatedly upheld by courts and all those kinds of things. So that you say it's unconstitutional, or that this person says it's unconstitutional, well, that's your interpretation, but it's not necessarily a legal interpretation. Give us a reason, I understand the process that you're using there because they're not part of that process, but that's true for a lot of people who are excluded from the system for whatever reason, age, for instance. I thought you had some pretty good visualizations, and like I said, I think the delivery is pretty solid. You need a little bit more information on some injustices where this has happened. It would be great if you had a couple of cases of kids who are clearly being sentenced and they shouldn't be sentenced in this way, and problems that occurred as a result. If you had some story like that, that would also be a little bit more involving. All right, thank you.